Welcome to the Board Game Doctors. In this episode, Earth, Solo Mode First Thoughts and Impressions. Hello everyone, this is Phil, and today I wanted to talk about my experience with Earth, the new board game that's on Kickstarter right now, produced by Inside Up Games, and designed by Maxime Tardif. So, what first got me interested in Earth was a preview that was done by Man vs. Meeple, where they described this game as a card uh, building, tableau building card game where you build an engine, and it played very similarly to Wingspan, having multiple individualized cards, having that nature theme, and playing in a relatively short time, about 45 to 90 minutes for 1 to 5 players. So that got me really interested, and I really wanted to, put down my thoughts after playing the game solo on Tabletop Simulator, and hopefully I get a chance to play it multiplayer here soon, maybe with Jacob, but here we go. This is what I think about this game. So first of all, Earth itself is a game. It's a medium weight game, like I said, a card-driven tableau building, engine building game, where you play your cards on a 4x4 grid. And these cards they're mostly plants, basically, that you're playing, but there are also terrains and other, event cards that you can play during the game. But you have 4 different actions in the game. Usually it's either play a card, gain resources to play these cards, gain plant cubes, and growth icons that you can put onto your plants, which basically gain you extra points in the game. You're cycling through these actions, playing these cards onto your tableau, and then when you do play these cards, it's really cool. In a multiplayer game, the other players will get a smaller version of the action that you took, and so there's little downtime. And then the solo mode, it kind of works the same way, where the Automa player is doing something with the actions that you're doing to gain more points and keep up with you. But after you take that action and everyone takes their smaller action, then you can activate a certain color on your board. So, for example, the green action is you basically plant cards onto your tableau. If any of your cards that are already on your tableau have the green icon and tell you to do something, which could be a myriad of things like, plant an extra card, or take a growth action, or gain some soil, compost, and all of those things, then you activate them from left to right, from columns, from the first column left to right, and then going down each row if you have them available. So really open-ended version of a tableau building, and you really get to set up your cards the way that you want to in order to activate these powers for your engine. So transitioning to the solo mode, it's pretty straightforward. When you take your turn, you do your main action. The Automa player on your specific solo board will tell you what the actions the Automa player can take, and then you activate your powers, and then you just flip over a card in the Automa deck, do what it says, and then move on back to your own turn. Very reminiscent of the Automa player in Wingspan. There are different difficulties that you can take with the Automa player. It's really interesting. On your own personal board, you'll see that the Automa actions that you take after your own are a little bit different if you decide to play it on beginner or a more advanced mode. And so it was pretty interesting. You'll see I'll talk about my experience a little bit later, but so that's kind of the solo mode in a nutshell. You basically have spaces on the Automa player board where you can put growth tiles, you can put plant cubes, composted cards, as well as face-up cards that score the amount that they have for their face-up value as well. Just add those all up and score at the end of the game. It's pretty straightforward. So kudos to the team for developing a very streamlined Automa player. I really do appreciate the games that allow you to take the computer's or the Automa's turn very quickly, very easily. There's not a lot of fuss or fiddliness, so you can get back to your own turn and strategize. So I think they accomplished that here. So in addition to your turns and everything, the way that the game is set up is pretty nice. You have four different fauna cards out in play at the beginning of the game that give you some in-game objectives to try to earn before the game is done. The game ends when either you, in a solo game, I should say, it either ends when you develop your own 4x4 grid and fill all of those cards, out, or if the Automa deck goes through twice. And there are 6 cards in the deck, and so in the beginner level, some of those cards allow you to take an extra turn, so it gives you 14 turns to play through the game. If you're doing it at a higher level of difficulty, then it's 12 turns. So not a lot of time to get your engine going, but that's the point of the game, is to try to get as much done before the time runs out. Anyway, so in addition to so that's the structure of the game. You start the game off by setting up these 4 fauna cards. They're double-sided, and you get to have those in-game objectives that you're working towards. You have these environmental cards as well. To the side, there are 2 of them that you can shoot for at the end of the game, end game points there. And so as far as the setup too, like I was reading in the rule book, there's over like 24,000 different ways to set up this game, because they include like 20 different fauna cards or so that are double-sided. Same with the environmental cards, and same with the personal cards that you get to put on your board, which is like an island card and a like another environment card, where it kind of tells you what starting resources you get, what specific powers that you can have right off the bat that you can utilize as well. It's a really cool way to set up the game. It kind of takes those initial steps in Engine Builder and says, hey, let me give you exactly what kind of resources you need. Here's a power that you can utilize right off the bat on your first turn if you want to. And here's a personal objective card that you can use to guide your strategy, as well as the common ones out in the middle of the board. If you reach those in-game objectives, you get more points than the other players who can also complete those objectives, but they earn less points later on in the game. So that's a really nice feature, and I think there's a lot of good foundation set up at the beginning of the game to say, okay, this is where we're going to go. Here are your starting cards. Good luck. So with my particular experience, I admit this was a first-time play. I'm trying to play this as quickly as possible with the limited amount of time that I have, but trying to play as close to the rules as possible. I probably made a mistake or two when playing. Forgot to do something, but it's more about how I feel about the game flow rather than having the rules be strict for me in my terms of enjoyment. I'm sure that with additional plays that becomes a little bit easier. So learning the rules, the rule book was pretty good. It was pretty straightforward. I liked the organization, the color coding for different sections. It was easy to reference a little bit later in the game when I had a question about how does this action play out? How does this in the solo mode play? What do I do for the guy's turn? I would say that with this rule book, it's probably early. It's a work in progress. It's in the early stages, but I did feel like a player aid or a reference sheet at the back of the book would be nice to have all the icons listed there and a quick text of how they work. I think I at first I did struggle remembering what each icon meant, especially the ones regarding the compost. It looks like a kind of like a recycling type of arrow or a circle around an icon. Sometimes it's a leaf, sometimes it's a hand, sometimes it's 2 cards, and they all mean different things, kind of about the same thing, about composting and how you approach it based on if it's either you or the solo player, but or the automa. Regardless, I think it was relatively easy looking back. Now that I've played through a whole game, it was pretty easy to uh, remember and figure that out. But the initial steps, I think, would have been it would have been nice to have a player reference there at the beginning. Score wise, I did lose against the Automa, which is a good thing for me. It was interesting at first. I thought that this game would be too easy, right? I thought, okay, you get to basically play all of these cards out onto your tableau um, in any row or column, and just have at it. It's a point salad game, so anything that you do will net you some points. So I thought, okay, regardless of what I do, I'm going to get points, and I'm probably going to have a score that's comparable to the Automa. And if I calculated everything right, this is a huge caveat as the first game with mistakes made. I still lost by about 30 or 40 points. It was like 150 to 190 or something like that. So I do appreciate that. I think that tells me that there is some depth to strategy in this game, even though there are so many ways to score points. All the plant cubes that you put out, all the growth cubes, all the face-up cards that you play, they basically all get you points. But if you're playing them in a certain way, um, I really enjoyed some of the terrain cards that said, okay, play. You get more points if you place these types of plants orthogonally to it, or if you can trace like a diagonal, throughout your map with like the certain like mushroom type cards or something like that. That was one of the objectives that I had in my game. Then you get extra points there. So that kind of reminded me of Ora et Labora by Uwe Rosenberg, where it's not necessarily just where just placing a building or placing a card onto your tableau. That's not the only thing. It's where you place it is very crucial for getting some extra points there. So I like that crafting um, ability that you have to maneuver your own cards onto your tableau. That was a lot of fun. The engine building part of it as well. At first I thought, okay, a lot of these cards are just variations on the same theme, where you're giving up. Sometimes you're just giving up some compost cards or something to gain different resources, or you are, just drawing cards, or it had your basic four actions in different variations with those special colored powers, but the rule about how they activate, which is basically you start at the top left corner of your tableau, work across from left to right, and then you move down to the second, third, and fourth row, if I understand that correctly. Regardless, there is an order to how these cards are activated, and because of that, once again, the placement of these cards really mattered. And I could see like throughout the game where, oh, if I placed that card there instead, I could have activated these in a certain way and had the resources to activate this card, and henceforth, build a more effective and efficient engine. So that was a lot of fun, and that I really appreciated that depth that was added there. So yeah, so to me, my experience was very positive. I really like the aesthetics. The theme was great. I loved the flavor text. It reminds me of Wingspan. I think they took a lot of things from nature, facts about these plants, and didn't just give arbitrary powers to them. Like, they kind of make sense. The way that they grow, how many plant cubes you can have on them. I think it was very well balanced, and with repeated plays, maybe we see some cards become better than others, but once again, the deck is pretty stacked. There was over 200 cards that you can draw from. I think almost 300. When I ended the game, I think I had drawn just below 200, or somewhere between 150 and 200 cards that I either cycled through by drawing them into my hand, or that were placed into my compost or were placed into the Automa players area as well. And so that's another great thing about this game is that even though it's very open-ended, you um, it I can see people liking games that are a little bit more restrictive, where you're only dealt so many cards during the game, and you have to just figure out what you get with that. And that, like games like Dice Worker Placement for me is very restrictive because sometimes you can modify the dice roll a little bit, but I feel like once you roll those dice, that's just kind of what you're given. You don't have as many options as you think you do, and it's often up to the dice on what you can do unless you strategize and plan in advance. I think it's in this game it's a little bit easier to manage because the card draw is very forgiving. You do draw a lot of cards during the game, so you have plenty of options to work with and to try to accomplish those objectives that are set forth at the beginning of the game. And so to me, that was a definite plus. I guess I do tend to like more sandboxy games with lots of options and finding the most efficient puzzle. And even if I don't find that most efficient, min-maxed strategy at the end of the game, I still felt like I did something and built something pretty cool. I didn't finish my tableau in this game. I ran out of time. And with repeated plays, I think that will get easier to do. But I was still really pleasantly surprised and satisfied with what I was able to accomplish during the game, and I liked what I was able to put down and try to accomplish. So for me, my first impressions for this game, specifically for the solo mode, but just reminiscing about how this would play in real life with other players as well, I really do appreciate the weight of the game. It's a relatively simple rule set with deep strategy, not because it's restrictive, but because you are given enough tools to really try to build out your own engine in the most efficient way possible. And so that is a big plus for me. It's an 8 out of 10 for me right now if I were to use a BGG rating scale. Definitely want to repeat plays, and I'm very interested in getting this and backing this and hopefully getting a physical copy. So to me, if I were to compare this game to others, I would compare this to Wingspan, of course. I think is a big, I would say would be an inspiration for this game. I think Puerto Rico is another game that I thought of with the amount of, the decreased amount of downtime that you have during the game, where other players are taking smaller versions of the actions that you take as well. I really like that. And once again, that's another testament to how many resources you can get during the game. It just feels good that, like, oh, I'm so glad that you took that turn. Now I have these resources, so I can take this other turn and really fulfill my engine. And maybe that action will benefit you in the end. And so it's very positive. Positive interaction, I think, is a key focus of this game, which is refreshing and really nice. I do really enjoy the interactive blocking, worker placement or something like brass. That you are working with other players, but at the same time it can be very competitive. In this one, it's dialing more back to the positive interactions. You're not really taking cards away from other people. There aren't any negative cards that I've seen that affect you negatively. It was interesting. The event cards in this game were self-inflicting, where you would lose face-up value points as well as potentially some resources of your own. But from that, you do gain a good amount of another type of resource for the most part. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. And one of the objectives that I had during the game, if you played more events, then you would get more. You get some points there too. So it's really interesting. Yeah, a lot of depth to this game for a medium weight game, which is perfect. Easy, relatively easy to teach. it has rich gameplay and rich variety, leading to replayability, which is a must for me. And so I think I could easily pull this game out and teach friends who have played some board games before but aren't quite at that heavy Euro, heavy rule set type of mindset yet. And this is a great bridge between that I would use in conjunction with Wingspan. But my final concern when I heard about this game, especially with Arc Nova coming out, which I have pre-ordered and adored when I played, is you have Wingspan, you have Terraforming Mars, you have Arc Nova, which are all these archetypal like games with lots of individual cards and tableau building and things like that. Uh, does this game stand out from, especially for me, for Wingspan and Arc Nova, since they have similar themes? They have the multiple cards. Does it stand out? And I think it does. I think Wingspan serves a good purpose where it's very straightforward. I think Wingspan is lighter than Earth because in Wingspan, even though they share the same, you can only take 4 actions. You don't have to worry about like the smaller actions that you take. I feel like the tableau placement is a little bit heavier in Earth and requires a little bit more thinking, whereas in Wingspan it's a little bit more straightforward. You just play left to right. And so yeah, so I think it's definitely heavier than Wingspan, lighter than Arc Nova. I think Arc Nova's tableau placement is heavier with the polyomino effect that you have there, trying to place your own zoo and as you're cycling through those cards, there are so many different upgrades and different objectives that you're trying to reach there as well. It with the rule burden at the beginning of the game as well as length of time, that makes Arc Nova a little bit heavier. But so Earth, it feels different than those other 2 games. I think I enjoyed the Automa, the solo mode a lot. It's nice to play against an Automa player and try to have a score to beat at the end of the game. What I really enjoyed too is I felt that I based on my strategy that I thought was prudent with the cards that I was given at the beginning of the game, I gravitated towards certain actions more than others. I tried to get a lot of, or at least activate a lot of the yellow abilities, and so I was drawing a lot of cards, doing growth, not really planting a lot of cubes on my cards, and of course I didn't plant my full tableau. So because of that, I was looking at the Automa cards and or at least the small actions that happen after I take my own actions, and I saw that I didn't utilize all the ways that the Automa player could gain points at the end of the game, and that was pretty cool. I think it was balanced enough that if I were to try to do a different strategy, utilizing some other actions during the game more so than others, then the Automa would be balanced in that way, and it would reflect in the score relatively similarly. So I thought that was great, and so I think the balance of this game is pretty spot on. Time will tell if all the cards are pretty balanced, but I think I saw a diary entry by the designer Maxim, or maybe it was on the Kickstarter page, where it showed kind of like his own graph about balancing, and it seems like balance was a forefront idea for this game, which is really nice. And so so kudos to the team for putting so much effort into this game before it was released on Kickstarter. It looks like, according to the timeline, it finishes early March for the kickstarting portion and will be shipping and arriving at homes hopefully in December later this year. And so I'm not a big Kickstarter person. I'm not well versed in the ways of Kickstarter, but it's good to have a somewhat of a timeline there and not be waiting super long for this game. So yeah, like I said, 8 out of 10. Really enjoyable game. It was quick. Played in about an hour for me to learn the rules and play, and so I look forward to repeating this and see if I get better at it. And this is a great game to pull out with a wider audience of board gamers as well. And so, um, fantastic game. It's a high recommend from me. Thanks for listening. Don't forget you can leave a review, catch us on YouTube, or reach out to us at boardgamedoctors@gmail.com.